Hello, everyone. I'm Vera, BGI's newest research apprentice, and in this installment of Judges in the Community, I'm joined by Judge Julia Alojamento of the Santa Clara County Superior Court, focusing today on her incredible push to promote diversity in the judicial world through an inspiring annual program for students at all stages of exploration. Good afternoon, Judge.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Before anything else, I just wanted to thank you so much for being here to shed some light into how you've been able to make an impact in your community. And before we dive in, would you mind giving a few quick details on who you are, where you sit, and your personal history in the judiciary?
Sure. So I sit in Santa Clara County. I was born and raised in San Jose, and went to UCLA undergrad, and then came back to the Bay Area and went to UC Law SF for law school. Graduating from law school, I did a federal clerkship for a judge, and so got kind of some early on firsthand experience with what it is like to be a judge, and then came back to the Bay Area. I did that in Los Angeles. I came back to the Bay Area, worked at Morrison and Foerster at a law firm for a few years, then became a prosecutor with the Santa Clara County DA's office, and then became a judge in 2010. I was sworn in 2011. As a judge, I've worked in a variety of areas, a lot of it actually in the criminal world, doing, felony trials and preliminary examinations for much of it. But I also covered drug treatment court, mental health court, juvenile justice, and I have recently moved over to civil trials, and I'm currently sitting there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for that. It's
Sure.
so amazing to meet you. I know for a fact that you and the colleagues at your courthouse are particularly intertwined with the community. I know you do a lot of good work, more than we could possibly cover in one conversation. But which program in specific is it that brings you here today to highlight and share with the judicial community?
Yeah, we try to do a lot of different outreach programs in Santa Clara County to cover different focuses and different things we're trying to strive to achieve. The one that we're going to be talking about today is the Color of Justice program. It is actually one of our newer programs that we started in 2020. We started it right during the pandemic, so that was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But have developed it over the last few years, and I'm very excited about this program for sure.
But I'm just curious about where it started, what it consists of, just kind of what it looks like on an annual
Sure.
basis.
So we wanted to be able to really outreach to young people who come from different communities and are really kind of underrepresented in the justice system. So it serves a lot of different goals. What we wanted to do was really show them that they have a path to work in the justice system, even if they don't have, a lawyer in the family or a mother who's a judge or, something that's showing them the pathway. And so what we wanted to do was have them come to the court and interact with a number of different judges or attorneys. We actually broadly defined the justice system to also include, deputies, courtroom clerks. I mean, anyone who kind of works in this area, maybe even people who have some, political aspirations or leaders in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted them to see that although maybe when they look on TV or they, watch a movie, it doesn't always seem that someone from their community is represented in the justice system as a judge or as an attorney, but that there are pathways and that they could definitely participate in that and that they should.
Mm-hmm.
So we reached out to a number of different attorneys and judges who come from a variety of backgrounds, and we are really super fortunate in Santa Clara County that we have quite a diverse bench. No bench is perfect, but I do think it's important that the makeup of the bench does its best to reflect the community in which you are serving. And so we wanted people to be able to, these young people, to see someone who maybe looks like them, who has a path like them, has a background like them. And we just have a lot of different judges who can speak to that, really personally. And so that was the goal of the program. That's how we started it. We did start it in 2020, so we had to shift things a little bit because of the pandemic and also because of what was going on in the world. So our focus in 2020 was a little bit different than it is now. It did morph a little bit that year and then kind of morphed back to what our goals were in terms of creating a pathway for these individuals to not only see people who maybe have a similar background as them, who are now, sitting judges or working in the justice system, but also to give them resources and an opportunity to understand, how do I pursue that path? If there isn't someone, in my family or someone else kind of guiding me, how do I make those proper steps toward that? At the end of the day, we are looking to help these students. But I will say it's also something that to me is super important in our justice system as a whole. It's going to help if we have that shared diversity represented on our bench. It also helps with public trust of the system as a whole, right? People realize, oh, there are people from my community who are also serving in these positions of power, right? And it also helps just to bring, of course, a diversity, not only of people, but of ideas, of backgrounds. And that is something that's really important as we all sit up here on the bench to, really share different life experiences and different perspectives as we're making these very important decisions in people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty amazing what an impact programs like this can make in so many different forms. And then from your perspective, through its inception, its evolution, is there anything in particular that has stuck with you most or that's impacted you individually?
I will say the last one we did was incredible, but maybe I can talk about it from the context of how it started and then how it got where it was. So we had this idea, this was something that we wanted to do, and we borrow ideas from other counties. I'm not going to say that we come up with everything ourselves, but we then try to, make it our own and develop it into something that we think really fits for our community. In 2020, as you know, of course, everybody was dealing with the pandemic. But simultaneously, we were obviously in a big outrage and challenging situation in terms of the interaction, I would say, between the justice system and the communities after George Floyd. And so there was a lot of discussion during that time about what that initial program is about and should be about. We actually were collaborating with an urban debate league at the time to reach out to some of their students. And if you don't know, urban debate leagues are often placed in communities and have some similar goals in reaching out to underserved communities to really teach students debate so that they have a way to learn to use their voice, which I think is amazing. And then they can use that in a variety of ways, whether or not they really want to pursue a career in the justice system or not. But we had worked really closely with them on this first one because they sort of had the audience we were trying to reach out to. After George Floyd happened, the debate league also happened to be working on some important topics related to criminal justice reform. So our first Color of Justice program was a little bit more open-ended in terms of different discussions about sort of what was happening in the system. Obviously, judges are limited on what we can talk about, so we didn't, get into details of cases or anything like that. And we worked with different partners on that one. So that was a really spectacular program that we did remotely for the first program. Since that time, it's really shifted back to where our original thought was, which was to provide this pathway for students. The second time we did it, we still had to do it virtual because although we weren't in the heart of the pandemic, it was still not really to bring people, together. So for that one, we had more of the panel discussions about people's different paths and their stories and different ways they were able to achieve what they wanted to in becoming a certain role in the justice system, and barriers that they had and kind of how they dealt with them and overcame them. And then we had separate panels related to talking with them about different resources. And then lo and behold, the last time we did it, we finally got to do it in person. And that is the one that sticks with me, of course, the most,
Right.
because it's just always a different thing to do any program in person. I'm so glad we're back to being in person. But for the in-person program, what stood out to me was that the people in our own community who we recruited, so there was, we had a judge speak. We were fortunate to have one of our sixth appellate justices, Justice Wilson, who's amazing, come and kind of give the keynote at the end. But before that, we had on a panel, we had someone from the district attorney's office, we had someone from the public defender's office, we had someone who was a deputy sheriff and had worked in the courts, and we had another person from probation. And all of these individuals had really amazing personal stories to tell. And so these are people who you really only interact with, professionally and in court. And as they talked about their background and their barriers that they had and the way in which they overcame them to get to where they were, and all the times that they either didn't think they could do it or didn't think they wanted to do it, or, really had problems with the system or whatever else, that they were talking about. And each person was so uniquely different. It was so personal and powerful and raw, I think more than maybe any other program that we've really done, in a way that you could definitely hear a pin drop in the room. I mean, the students were all completely absorbed in these stories. And for me, it was amazing. And I'm so appreciative of the people who agreed to do it, because for them to be that vulnerable, I think, and tell their stories like that in a way that they know is going to help someone else, right? To be able to say, oh, look at all the hardships this person went through to get to where they are. I can do it too. Right? I may have these barriers in my life. I may not know how I'm going to get money for college. I may, have people telling me this isn't something I should do. I may go into a room and feel like I don't look like anybody else who's here. But here's people who are telling me that you can and you should do it, and you have a voice, and here's how to, follow the path, was amazing. So that part of the discussion was super inspiring to me. Then we followed it up with resources, with, okay, now you've decided you can and you should do this. How do you get there? And so we gave them different stepping stones, like maybe get involved in an urban debate league, right? There's also a Pathways to Law program that, is pretty active in our community. We talked about that, peer court, other things they can get involved in, and talked about that. But I think it was that first panel that stuck out to me. That and Justice Wilson, is a extremely incredible speaker, and he was a highlight as well, for sure.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. Radical transparency like that is just so powerful, so affecting. And I think I do think it's important to pair it with the practical side of things too, how to make it an actionable set of steps. So I imagine that you really are changing lives with this. And I wonder if you've had any interactions with the students who attended, anything in particular that shows the impact you're making.
We are fortunate in that I think the hardest thing for some of these programs is that you can pull together a good program, but you want to make sure you're reaching the audience that is appropriate, right? And so where we're fortunate is we have great partners who work with us on outreach. So I chair a community outreach committee, and I think our committee and the work that we do in the courts is successful because of everybody from the outside who comes on our committee. It's not a bunch of judges just saying, hey, here's the thing you need. Let us tell you what you need. Is bringing community members in and educators and people who work with nonprofits and other organizations and probation and the DA's office of public defenders to say, like, how can we make a difference in the community? So the benefit was for this program, we had people from probation who can work with some individuals who actually had been system involved and really maybe needed to turn their experience into something more positive. And then, for example, the Urban Debate League, and then some of the educators we worked with. The benefit of that is we do get feedback. So, in particular from the Silicon Valley Urban Debate League, I know we got information back from people. Real specifically, I can think of one where they did get back to us and say there was a student who didn't think that their parents would be supportive of them going to law school, not like just financially, but just at all. And really kind of questioned whether they thought that was the thing they could do. And that after this program, they were very determined, and they went and spoke with them, and they were now on the pathway, and they were going to pursue that. And so that was really, rewarding to see that they were going to move forward on that. And I love your term radical transparency, but that's exactly what it was. I think it's, when you do programs like this too, it's incredibly helpful for our branch of government as a whole, that people see that the people who are making decisions are real people with, their own real backgrounds and struggles and challenges and things they overcame to get to where they are. And I think that makes, maybe judges a little bit more relatable. But I think more so than that, the importance of that is that trust I was talking about. If the community doesn't have trust in the judiciary, feeling like the people who are making these decisions about my life actually care about the decisions they're making, then there'll never be that trust. And I do think these types of programs help build that. And quite frankly, we're all going to benefit from it, right? I mean, the Chief Justice, along with really, I think, judges everywhere, we recognize the importance of a diverse bench. But it's one thing to start talking about that, once people are in law school. I think it's really important. What we're doing is talking about it long before, to reach out to people who don't even see that as an opportunity to them, to say, open your eyes, you too should be part of this. We welcome you. We want that diversity of thought.
Yeah, making change starts at square one. And I think that trying to spread programs like these throughout the rest of the country is going to be such a positive wave. And it's my hope that when people listen to stories like yours, that new projects can spring up and take things that you've given and make them their own, just as you did. So from that standpoint, from a pragmatic view, how did you sort of bring this to life? Obviously, reaching into the community is incredibly important, but is there anything else that you think was crucial?
I do think, as you mentioned, we do so many different outreach programs, but I do think that all of them, like I said, can only be done because of the collaboration that we've built. I think it's very hard as a court to just say, we're going to do this. I mean, it's good. It's certainly better than not doing anything. But I think building those relationships with educators, for example, like I said, the Urban Debate League or other, probation or other places, so that you have that connection with that portion of the community you're trying to reach. That really helped make it a success. It also, really helps in terms of having further impact, because those groups are going to kind of follow up with those individuals. Certainly, we've also tried to let this be for the students a bit of a, almost like a networking type, situation, right? So if they connect, particularly with one of the attorneys or something, maybe that's something that can be an email or a phone call later, or a follow up, when they're struggling. But I really do think in planning the program, it's making sure you have a partnership at least, or a collaboration better, with a number of different groups, so that you can build that program together so it really does meet the needs of the people you're trying to reach.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
what we always say is what this program is not is, us putting up a flyer that says, come learn to be a lawyer, right?
Right.
There's plenty of people who are going to be on their pathway to law and don't really need any assistance. I mean, it's hard. It's a hard pathway no matter who's doing it, right? But what we're trying to reach are those people maybe who haven't even said, oh, law school is somewhere I want to go, but really have that potential. You asked me the thing that struck me. I will say this for, I don't know, this is more just an interesting point that came out of it. Almost every person who spoke was involved in something. And I would say that almost all of them, if not all of them, it was sports. And it was that thing that saved them, so to speak, from kind of a different pathway or a challenging thing. And that someone saw something in them to encourage them to kind of continue, to encourage them to take that first step, go to college, right? And then from there, they had different opportunities or different encouragement. And I thought that was really powerful. I think that all of us, we don't know the impact that you can have at an early on age for some of these students by just saying, hey, this is something you could do. Like, you are good enough. You should try this. And so, again, just bringing that out home, I guess, I think that if the more you can have people within your collaboration who have that direct connection with the students, the more successful of a program you're going to have, because they, like I said, can continue to encourage them and also can make sure you're collecting the right students you want to reach.
I think it's especially true that, or in your courthouse where you have so many different types of outreach, looking to support so many different parts of the community, that none of those needs could be tapped if you weren't in constant communication with the community members and trying to see what is most important to them and how to help them thrive and come together. So it just all feels incredibly impactful and beautiful, and I really appreciate you sharing it with me today.
Thank you so much. We are absolutely looking forward. We are planning, starting our planning now for 2024. We typically try to do it in February. In fact, I think our date is already set on February 21st, 2024 for this year. We intentionally try to structure it around well, so many things we're celebrating, but Black History Month, along with MLK Day, Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties, Cesar Chavez Office Day. I mean, they all kind of converge within like a couple months. And so we picked something kind of in the middle of all of that to really just say, this is, it's a celebration of diversity, but it's also a like, now let's get to work. Now let's see how we can take that feeling that we welcome this, we want this, it benefits the system, it benefits the individuals in the system, it promotes trust, all of those things, and bring it together in a practical way, starting young with, hey, let's start you thinking about how you can make a difference, how your voice should be heard, and what steps do you take to get there.
I already know it's going to be a roaring success. Trust me.
Thank you.
I look
Thank you
forward
so
to
much.
February.
Thank you.